I had it from prize money. I was like, I'm going to test it out.
And it looked awesome.
Thank you, thank you. I was very happy with it. And it's great for armor because it adds that strength to foam. It's a hard surface, and again, it's heat molded. So you layer it over the foam, you heat gun it, and then you're able to mold it over it. So Fibra is probably my favorite thermoplastic. It's a vacuum form thermoplastic, so it has to have something underneath it. So you make your foam shape, you put the Fibra on top, and it makes it really sturdy. Fibra do a variety, Fibra Pearl and Tex, which is one that actually has a material lining underneath it. You can also have Warbler, which is probably one that you've heard of quite commonly. Warbler comes in a bunch of varieties. You've got regular pearly, which is really good if you're trying to make a smooth surface. Black is basically the same as regular but cheaper normally. You've even got transparent, and there's even red, which is my favorite because it's a fire retardant thermoplastic. Don't know why you need it for cosplay, but you never know, right? And they all have different properties. So down here is a picture from Black Owl Studios showing how well each version of Warbler actually takes to a shape underneath it. And you can see the top layer, the surfaces are all kind of bubbly. You need to sand that after, whereas the bottom layer are much more ready to go. I would still recommend sanding them, but they're a much smoother surface to work with. But there are other thermoplastics. You shouldn't just think, oh, I've heard people talk about Warbler, I'm going to use it. You should do your research. Wonderflex is fantastic. It and Variform operate like bandages that you then put in water and can wrap around things. They're heavier than Warbler and Fibra, but you know, if you're making a smaller part of an armor that just needs to be very sturdy, it's a good material. And also you can use PVC. So PVC sheets like Forex and Sintra, they're really commonly used for armor builds in the continental Europe. A lot of people like them because you don't have to put foam underneath them. You just heat shape it and you're done. But with all of these materials, it becomes a thing of having the tools to work with them. You need a heat gun, you need something that you can sand at the end, and also you need a well-ventilated area because all of these materials will off-gas, and so you need to make sure that you have a mask on, you need to make sure that the window's open or you're doing it outside. So there is space requirement, which foam really isn't, which is why you will see a lot of people use foam quite often because it's cheaper as well. So 3D printing is something that I recently got into because I got myself a 3D printer over lockdown and it's awesome. And it is a way that you can both make pieces of armor as well as pieces that will go onto armor. So I haven't managed to actually make a piece of armor with my 3D printer yet, but I've made little like knuckle armors that go on gloves with it. And it's a really good way to work with things that are quite small because the 3D print filament, once it's printed, is very sturdy, easy to sand, easy to paint, and easy to glue onto things. So it's definitely something that I would encourage people to look into for kind of making pieces for their armor as something to research. And you know, eventually in a couple of years we can all come back and talk about what worked and what didn't in regards to this. So that's definitely a newer one, but it's worth mentioning if you have access to a 3D printer. And they're getting cheaper. Like a lot of 3D printers are very affordable now, and the materials are, so they're a great thing to look into. So other materials you can use, I love fabrics because I love going to a convention and wearing my suits of armor, and then they get banged because people knock into them and the paints get absolutely destroyed. Bingo! Cover your armor with fabric and then the paint doesn't get chipped because there's no paint to chip, is my new favorite thing to do. So, but also, as well as covering foam with leather, you can also use leather to make armor. So I made Wonder Woman's costume. And I initially thought, well, I'm going to have to make this out of foam because it needs to be sturdy. And then I thought, well, actually, I don't want it to be made out of foam because her outfit's not bulky. And even if I'm using a thin foam, it's going to add that bulk to it. So what I decided to do in the end is I made a corset and I used leather to actually emulate the armor, and then I weathered it so that it looked like armor. And I was really happy with the results. And it also meant that I wasn't, you know, stuck upright like this the entire day because I couldn't bend because I had foam on me. I had leather, so I could slouch a bit if I was getting a bit tired, could bend over if I needed to pick things up off the floor. So I gave myself a bit of movement as well, which was quite good. Other materials you can use, cosplay and Fimo and kind of materials like that are really great for detail work. They're not going to be good for making the armor itself, but they're important materials to know about. Cardboard and poster board is not something I've worked with personally, but if any of you guys are quite active in the cosplay community, you probably know of Alison Tabitha, and she made her entire Wonder Woman armor out of poster board, and I'm like, how do you do this? So yeah, that's a material that apparently you can use. Expand